Perfect. Hi, Evelyn. Welcome back to the podcast. I am
Hi.
so excited to have you and share a little bit about the astrology that's coming this upcoming month.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ashlan. It's been a lot of fun being able to, look ahead, talk about
Yeah.
it, and then even for myself, go back and listen to it. And then, like, oh, right. Oh,
Right?
yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
said
that's
that.
what's
That's
happening.
right.
That's
That is
why
happening.
that's why I'm feeling this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Completely. Um, what can you share? We're going into May 2023. What is the theme for this month?
The theme for the month is since, of course, it's Taurus season,
Mhm.
and the eclipse is happening in the Taurus Scorpio axis. The theme is all about stability, self worth, resources, money, and also letting go of the past.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. Can you share a little bit? Because I know we're coming up into that lunar eclipse happening. When is that happening?
The lunar eclipse happens on the 5th, and it's at 10:34 a.m. On the West Coast, so Pacific daytime. And the moon will be at 14 degrees 58 minutes Scorpio, and then the sun will be in the opposite in Taurus, 14:58 Taurus.
Now, would this
Mhm.
happen to be almost making a Cazini with Mercury and Uranus, which I know is pretty close to that. I think actually
It
Mercury might be
is.
there now, but is it
It is close. It will be, Uranus will be 4 degrees off,
okay?
and then Mercury will be right there. I'm just going over to take a look, pull up the chart for full moon. Um, yep, Mercury will be about 6 degrees past.
Okay.
So not quite too close, not close enough to call it that, but Uranus will be the more important planet because the sun will be meeting Uranus 4 days after the eclipse. So there's going to be a lot of revelations that come out, a lot of
Mm.
changes and twists and turns because of that. And since Uranus has been in Taurus, creating this restructuring of our foundations in everyone's lives in various ways, this
Right.
is going to be a kind of a bigger acknowledgement of what that restructuring is. It'll be very clear, I think, for a lot of people of what the steps are in order to move beyond the disheveled energy of Uranus and figure out what we need to do to start rebuilding our lives.
You're right. Now, it's so interesting because the idea of having that Uranus there with the sun and then it opposing the moon in this um just such an interesting eclipse as well. It's not just a normal full moon, right? It's the eclipse. It feels like it's going to be more sudden changes and a lot being revealed and just things that need to come up and happen. And yeah, so I'm kind of not sure how that's going to play out, but it does. I can already sense the energy coming into the next week.
Yeah, yeah. The Scorpio moons are always an intense time. Like
Mhm.
Scorpio full moon, Scorpio new moons are always really intense times for us. And right after or right before the eclipse, even Pluto goes retrograde on the 1st. So we get a precursor to the Plutonian energies starting in the beginning of the month. When Pluto goes retrograde, it's a long cycle. Pluto is a very long orbit, and it creates a longer, slower
Mm.
kind of slow burning process, which initially might be hard to acknowledge or kind of pick up on for a lot of us. Some of
Right.
us, of course, who are very Plutonian or have a lot of strong Pluto or Scorpio in their charts will be immediately keyed in. But when Pluto goes retrograde, it is a very strong introspective time and a time of going inward and refocusing our microscopes internally, which
Mm.
can be kind of difficult for a lot of people. For the scorpionic Plutonian types, it's another day.
Right, right. It's very natural. Would you say so? It's going to go retrograde, and then is there a it squares? It's going to square Jupiter, isn't that correct? Right.
Yeah, so any planet now, well, any planet that is in the fixed 0 degree goes ahead and squares or opposes Pluto.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jupiter, when it ingresses into Taurus, immediately up squares Pluto
Mhm.
right before. It's like Jupiter moving into Taurus is typically a time of abundance and excitement and
Yeah.
future planning and growth. But then to have this immediate sort of shake up with Pluto
Right.
seems like bittersweet.
Right, right. Is there something that we should maybe look out for during that time? Because I know, Jupiter being so expansive and kind of wanting to go out there and expand. And then with that immediate, you know, square as it enters, is there any type of advice you can have to share with our listeners?
Yeah. So when Jupiter ingresses into Taurus, that's the 17th, on May 17th. Um, it's almost like the theme or the mantra of the time is this is why we can't have nice things. Because it feels like you get the thing, but then there's something maybe tainted, or there's something maybe um, there's a darker element or aspect to this opportunity, or it comes with strings attached, or there's an element of like control around this opportunity. The other thing outside of just opportunity, abundance, and money is the whole aspect of Jupiter being the planet of our belief systems.
Mm,
And when Jupiter moves into Taurus, it's about stabilizing and integrating our belief systems. But because it's going to meet Pluto in a square, it means, oh, actually, what I'm going to have to do is reassess my whole worldview around this, because actually I'm learning some deeper things
mm.
that question or test my belief. And that could be, again, around your values, your sense of self worth, about what you believe to be true for your, yeah, even it could be a material plane or how you navigate the material world. So, there's always an element of what the financial aspect is with Taurus.
Completely.
So, and the mundane level and like a more worldly level, the whole entire month of May is going to be quite zigzaggy when it comes to money and finance. Just keep seeing headline after headline of like this bank stock dropped 90%, this bank
Right.
stock is, they're just like dropping like flies.
I know, and we
And
spoke about that last month, and to see it kind of continue to fall, just the dominoes of it.
mhm. So, with that, the belief system of the stability of our resources gets shaken up and questioned. It's like, well, if I thought this one thing was so secure
Yeah.
in my life, and it turns out there's a very possible ability for it to disintegrate right before my very eyes,
Mm.
then I have to start to restructure and reshape my belief system around my sense of security in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny you bringing up beliefs, because and beliefs and even belief around religion and everything going on in the world with that key factor. It's almost like it's all being tested, and the beliefs are only becoming stronger. You know,
Mhm.
people are really, they're ready to kind of go to war over these beliefs, these political ideas, all these sorts of differences of opinion, if you ask me. But um it's almost becoming so amplified. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out over the next month.
True. Yeah, and good point to the political aspect of that, because Jupiter does rule Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is the sign of creating a belief system and a structure around a philosophy of
Right.
life, which is politics. It's political. The way that we believe that life should be structured is a political philosophy. So that gets questioned. And, or like to your point, because squares not only shake things up, but squares also confirm or solidify or create more stability, interestingly. So it could create for a lot of people this, like, in the fixed signs, this sense of digging the heels of what your beliefs are even deeper into the sand because of that sense of insecurity that's happening around you. So it could have that alternative effect for people where it's like, well, I'm feeling so less safe and I'm feeling so less secure that I'm going to, which is a defense mechanism for a certain type of person where it's like, well, I'm going to dig in even harder and not move and not change and only see
Mhm.
the storyline and the plot that confirms my belief.
Yep. Yes. And I feel like that's happened over the past 3 years to an amplified level anyhow, that this is just, it's almost like turning up the dial a little bit on it.
Mhm.
Right. So what would you say are, our best mode of operation moving through May, on focusing on in our own lives to kind of make this, clean out the things that we need to clean out, but also really start to grow and ground into a stable, whether it's a financial structure, a home structure, something where our resources, because nobody has the answer necessarily to what resource place we should put our money. It's like there's all these different ideas, but maybe there's a way to tune in intuitively into our own inner knowing that can help guide us into the right place to really start to uh,
Yeah,
find solid ground.
I think that's a really great way of approaching that because you don't want to do something that's so radically left field of what you're naturally inclined towards to create anxiety. Because when it comes to money and finance and the the numbers
Mhm.
game, if you put yourself in an emotional state, then that's inevitably going to cause an illogical reaction, which, as we know, Taurus is practical, Taurus is logical, Taurus is about the numbers. What is 2 plus
Yeah.
2 equals 4? And
Yes.
there's no argument around that. So, which is why the moon is exalted in Taurus, because there's a stability, an emotional stability in Taurus that the moon appreciates. The Taurus gives the moon structure. When without Taurus, the moon is able to go in all different directions, right? Our emotions are just like
Yes.
untethered. But in Taurus, the emotions are very solidly placed and defined. So, like doing something with your finances that makes sense to you, makes that you already inherently have a good intuition about. For instance, there's people who are wonderful at navigating vintage, right? Like that's a great place of resource to find material, and that's one of the things that I was writing about with the full moon eclipse is how to manage and preserve your resources that you already have. um, so yes, some people are great at knowing the inherent value of clothing. Some people are really great at knowing the inherent value of art or furniture. or even when it comes to food, for instance. So, it could be maybe the difference between, one brand versus the other. One is more expensive, but it's the same thing. So you opt for the less expensive one. That's a way of helping to preserve your finances too. So it's just being more money conscious and more conscious and aware of the values of the things or the quality
Yeah.
that you're investing in. So, one thing that I saw recently, someone posted a video of how to preserve your clothes,
Oh,
like how to
interesting.
do your laundry to
Yeah.
preserve your clothes because we're going into a recession. So, like, this is wonderful. This is such a Taurus season theme.
Right.
Um, like how to maintain the structure and the quality of what you already have. And then letting go of what is fluff and frivolous and just like maybe just luxury or for pure pleasure reasons,
Right.
which is the full moon in Scorpio. It is that we're not gonna sit around and choose the most kind of
Is
frivolous thing. Like we want substance with
it
Scorpio
it's
full
more
moon.
okay. Because I think of Scorpio maybe it's because my moon is in Scorpio, but it's like this instant gratification. So there's this need to have where Taurus is so opposite of that. It's the long haul. It's you working towards this beautiful place. And Scorpio is like
Mm,
Veruca Salt in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's like I want it now. And
mm,
so I actually I if I could pick a moon placement, I always would want a Taurus moon. It's like that would be my ideal. It's like just give me I would love the Taurus moon, but I don't have it, right? You get what you're born with, and I got that Scorpio moon, and there is this definite dive in. So it's knowing a lot of the Pluto underlying feelings, but that instant gratification. So my thought is during this time frame is how are we doing the opposite of the instant gratification, right? How are we really starting to, like you said, even preserve your clothes or find, valuable things at maybe a thrift shop or a vintage shop or just doing things that are a little bit more um, preserving of our resources.
yeah, absolutely. And then, the future of finance is up in the air.
Mm.
So it's really hard to say. Like, I have people asking me, coming to me and saying, my parents' 401k is in a Roth IRA. Should they take everything out and invest in Bitcoin? I'm like, no clue. I have no
Wow.
idea. Like, I'm not, definitely not a financial advisor, and I cannot tell anyone what is best for them because I don't know what their timeline is, which is another aspect of the earth element is having a good understanding and strong footing around time and your ability to see, okay, well, over time, this decision makes sense. But maybe in a certain amount of time, that decision doesn't make sense.
Right.
So, um,
There are astrological financial advisors as well.
there are.
Right. So, but I think that also is such a tricky situation because um, of all the astrology books, and I've read financial astrology books quite a bit. Um, there's always something maybe a little off. You don't, it doesn't mean that they're always getting every aspect exactly correct. So, what if yeah, it's just that fear of like, what if you take the advice completely of someone else and you lose everything and you were meant to lose everything, right? So it's kind of, I don't know. It's such a finances are such a tricky place. And all I can say is over this course of knowing this was coming and trying to be just super aware of it. I didn't do a lot of the preserving aspect as I maybe maybe should have, but I also think that if our dollar is to collapse at any time, then I hate to say this like this, but what difference would it have made? I don't
Hmm.
know if it would have made a bigger difference if I would have saved that extra
Right. Right. And
$10,000 or so, right?
right. And they say like the financial critics, I suppose, or and analysts that I do watch say leaving your money in the bank is a surefire way to lose money because
Mm,
it's just sitting there and it's not doing anything, which is a very Taurus thing, right? Like the desire to preserve and hold on to something to the point where it is now devaluing itself
yes,
just because of time.
right.
And Scorpio moon, but the beauty of Scorpio moon is that they're like, no, let's do it now. Let's transform this situation now. Let's get it over with because there is an intuitive foresight with Scorpio and capable to see like the potential down downturns of things, while Taurus might be more inclined to say, no, I'm going to wait it out. I'm just going to wait here
Yeah.
and see
Yeah.
how it all goes and hope for the
And
best.
it's definitely totally, and it's definitely much more that 401k vibe, but we can look at what's going on in France and say, look what happened there. This Macron comes in and decides he's going to erase the age or raise the age limit to where you can access that retirement. And
Hmm.
people went crazy. They went
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. And he still, I mean, like very Napoleon-esque, turned his back and just did it anyways. So
Hmm.
we don't know.
Which,
Yeah.
that's a hard stance that politicians, I think, just are going to be doing because that's what, when you're in such an unstable space, it requires dramatic and drastic
Mm.
steps towards stability. And I just read an article that talked about, or I was, yeah, by that guy Reich, David Reich, I think he's great. I'm sure a lot of people already have seen a lot of his stuff, but he was saying how in the 80s, the government decided to slowly raise the age of retirement to help adjust for what's going to happen with Social Security through with the boomers
Mm.
because it was they saw, oh well, the boomers are going to get to a certain age, we have to supplement Social Security somehow, so we have to raise the age limit, we have to raise the age for Social Security for retirement
Right.
purposes. So there's that was in place since the 80s for us.
But do you think that, with all this, I mean, they've been talking about Social Security for so long. And I think to, the younger generation, it's like, oh gosh, why are they talking about this? It's like, who
Right.
cares really? But yes, we all pay in some way, shape, or form during our working careers. But at the end of the day, are we going, if there is no social security and there is none of that, are we all really going to be, you know, uh, poverty stricken by the time we're in that age where we could actually receive it? Or is it even worth it to continue to fight over this? Maybe they should just, and I'm of that kind of frame point, I guess, and maybe they should just end it now and stop the bleeding because it feels like it's inevitable that it's going to run out at some point.
Right. And we've grown up with having that discourse kind of propagandized to us since day
Oh
one.
yeah.
Like, it's going to run out. It's going to run out. It's going to
Yeah.
run out. So we've had
But
this mantra
yes.
over and over and over again. So we're like,
Yes.
okay, well, there's that one element of that, right? The psychological, what it does to a society psychologically, to hear that same thing over and over again. But then also, with Uranus and Taurus and Uranus moving into It's in the United States fifth house right now in Placidus and whole sign. It's in the sixth house, which I can see both. But when Uranus officially moves into the sixth house for the United States, I do believe that UBI will just have to happen. It will be implemented. I think that the emergency funds through COVID on the debit cards was a really huge sort of program, guinea pig program
Oh, I agree.
for that.
Yep.
And to see how it would work, to work on any kinks, to figure out what doesn't work. We saw a lot of fraud happen because of that.
Huge.
I think it was a big experiment to see what UBI would look like for this country and what it would do. So I do believe that UBI universal basic income will be a part of our existence. So that might be a way for them to just say, okay, you know what? Everyone in this zip code gets this, everyone in this zip code gets that, who is under a certain income bracket. Leave it at that. And then it just is like you know,
Like a payment system. So
yeah.
would that be to equalize the whole playing field, kind of just make everybody equal in what their income level is? Or is that to just sustain the poor or
I
the
think it would be just to sustain the poor, which, you know, we already have a program for that, but I think there's a lot of conditions.
welfare program?
Yeah, there's a lot of conditions for that. And then there's a lot of cutbacks happening for that. I just think
There
like
is.
maybe there's going to
Yeah.
be like a big shift or a big kind of purge of all of these different programs and then just have one basic universal program for everyone under um a certain income bracket, and then with like a certain implementation like a card or
Mhm.
um
I think
you
they're
know a,
already doing that now with the food, like the food stamp card, right? It's
oh
like an
yeah,
EBT card.
oh
My,
right, yeah.
right. My question would be like even the thought process around that. Um, I mean, there would be so many questions, but really, does that keep, I don't know. I hate to say the word poor because that doesn't feel, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me. So I don't mean poor, but under a certain income level, right? Does that help to keep them under a certain income level? Because there's this idea, at least for me, with giving out a universal income, which we saw happen with COVID, where people stopped wanting to work. They stopped wanting to really do anything. They felt like they could just stay home. Oh, the government's sending me this money and yada yada. So it was like every single person filed for unemployment, it felt like, that I knew, right?
Mhm.
Um and so my concern or my question would be, is that something that then people no longer are part of the workforce, and maybe they're setting that up for AI to come in and take over those jobs? Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yes.
That's
Because I think I read a report that said something about something along the lines of 2 million jobs will just get immediately wiped out overnight with the implementation of Chat GPT. And I'm seeing it's a loose cannon. Pandora's box has been opened, it's out there, and it's already in effect. And so many people are going to lose jobs over that. So what are they going to do?
right.
You know,
But where is that money coming from that funds those cards? So if it does go to that system, where does the money come from to actually pay for that?
well, it's
And I
supposed to
know
come
that's not
from
astrology, but I mean,
right.
yeah.
It's supposed to come from revenue. It's supposed to come from the gross domestic product revenue of the country, of the productivity of our labor. And, but the way it's being managed is that it's getting bled dry in all of these different various, I say, political schemes that are
Yeah.
happening.
100%.
Um, but the interesting thing that's happening now worldwide on the global financial scale is that all of these countries are starting to agree to not use the US dollar as a trade currency for
Yes.
the markets.
Yes.
So that's going to have an influx of USD into our system and inflate the dollar even more because all of those dollars are no longer going to be floating in the global markets.
Right.
So where is it going to go? It's going to come back home and then it's going to inflate our dollar even more drastically.
Mm. So that would be, I mean, we're already dealing with such heavy and massive inflation. And I know China just made it was with Brazil, I believe, with the
Brazil,
oil.
Italy,
Yeah,
they're
to not
talking
trade
with,
in the US dollar anymore. Yes.
yeah. With Brazil, it's their all trades,
Mm,
all trades. Italy, it's with energy resources. And then with, I think it's Saudi Arabia, it's
oh, wow.
oil.
Okay.
Mhm. So trading oil for, I believe, their own currencies.
The
So I
yen,
guess
right?
if you want to invest in something, invest in the yuan.
No.
Invest in the yuan, because that's going to be the next global
Mm.
currency. Um,
Yeah. Well, if you look at this chart or the astrology of China, it's coming into some big power right now. So I
I
do.
haven't looked at that.
Oh, you'll have to check it out. It's just, it's so you see that it's almost like in the background happening, here in America, you hear little bits and pieces, but it's pretty obvious when you look at the greater picture of how the pieces are coming together. And they are starting to be the negotiator with all these different countries where the US, that was a kind of our role. So we're kind of taking this back seat. And with Pluto, yes, it's in Aquarius right now, but retrograding back to our Pluto of America point,
Hmm.
I think we're going to see more kind of come out and be revealed before it finally makes that longer ingress into Aquarius. Well, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
it's the nail in the coffin,
Mm,
the last and final Pluto return for the United States. Um, Also, then the United States will go through its Chiron return shortly after. There's all of these shifts and restructurings that are happening. And then in the progress charts, um, there's a lot of the going on with the transits too. So it's the final nail in the coffin. The question I've been kind of asking myself is, was it planned? Because that to me is the ultimate question.
yes.
Was it a plan for something bigger, or is this really just a case of
Of what
idiocracy?
mishaps? I mean, I think just,
Miss a bunch of just bloopers and
just
goofs?
right. Oh, um,
Oops.
yeah, right. Well, I mean, my thought or theory or truth always has been that no, this has been completely planned. But I picked up on that in 2020 when with the whole the shutdown of everything. That was my intuitive kind of awakening or hit where I just thought you've got to be kidding me. You've literally got to be kidding me that we live in a world where we fought for, or in a country where we fought for freedom, and the people just giving them away, like, oh yeah, take that. Yeah, I don't need that freedom. I don't need that. I don't need that. They can search my favorite always is they can hack my phone, or they can look at my phone. There's nothing I'm doing in there that matters. And while that may be true, it's like, yeah, but what if the ideal changes? What if the narrative changes and what you're doing on your phone then becomes a target of, a crime because
Mhm.
you said something against something and they didn't like it, or which is much more communist. So my feeling is, and even with the astrology, it seemed to be a plan. It doesn't seem to be, I mean, yes, sure, there's people in government that aren't maybe the sharpest tools in the shed, but I also think that there's something underlying. And maybe that is all this Pluto energy that I'm sensing, that's like, no, there's more to this story than is being shown. And I think over the next course of 20 years, we'll start to see more of what it is, but it definitely feels like, oh, how convenient now that the Chat GPT comes out, and how convenient that all of these other things are starting to come out, and people are just eating it up. They're just like, playing with it and doing all the things. And I don't know if you have dove into it at all. I haven't. Have you looked at it? You
Oh
have.
yeah, I was very curious. So I mean, I remember when I was a kid on AIM playing with the chat bot on Instant Messenger.
Okay.
And it was just fun to see if you can like trick it or, kind
Right.
of turn it on itself. Very Plutonian of me. But I looked up some astrological aspects, and it's interesting because I can kind of see, or I can kind of map where some of the information comes from. I'm like, okay, I can see that's like something that like Cosmo would say, or like,
Yes.
that's something that like maybe a deeper part of a, you know, interpretation would be. It's still pretty surface level, and the thing
Okay.
is that you're not going to be able to get anything that's written in a book, which is where all of the depth of astrological knowledge is. But it does a pretty good job of creating just really basic translations, which I think, if anything, is just a testament to astrology, and how unified us all as like
Astrologer.
astrologers and just students are
Right.
on our concepts of these signs and planets and houses.
Mm.
So I think it's pretty cool to see an artificial intelligence pick up on the language of astrology and be
Mm.
able to decipher and determine these various I did really complex aspects too, like
Did you?
what is the interpretation of a yod between the moon, Saturn, this is just mine, and the
Yeah.
sun with moon at the apex. Like I did really
Oh,
complicated
wow.
things because I'm like, because why not? Let's see.
See what it says.
See what it says. And I was like, okay, it's not too bad. It's definitely short, and it's like it
Condensed.
takes a lot out of obviously you're not going to know a person's history and their evolution as a soul and what lessons they have and have not learned yet. So still pretty general, but interesting.
That's so interesting. I know,
Yeah.
my thought would be like, have they put all the books, like the Hellenistic astrology books, or have they used that in the making of it, or is it just code? Is it
It
just like, yeah, computer?
I don't know. I think that it scans the internet.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think it just scans the information that's
On the internet.
published. Yeah.
Okay. So
Which then
because
you're like,
mhm.
oh, so then this is essentially our collective consciousness.
Right. Did you hear about the I think it's in Australia, the first Chat GPT lawsuit?
No.
Yeah.
Ooh.
There was a mayor or politician in Australia who Chat GPT said he was a part of a criminal activity, and then went to prison over this, crime that he in actuality helped be the center point of uncovering this criminal activity. Never went to jail or anything. So it got it got it wrong, and he's created a lawsuit and trying to take it to court. So
Interesting.
this is going to be bad. So I'm like, oh, we're kind of starting to see like what could happen. You know, somebody gets defamed from Chat GPT or AI in some way, and then are you able to sue it? You can sue a non-human consciousness. It's very interesting.
Yeah, its credibility is for sure still up for debate. And um, humans are flawed inherently. So if it's scanning everything that humans have said, then it will obviously be flawed because,
Right. Yeah.
I don't, where is it coming? What, again, yeah, like, is it getting its information from Wikipedia? Is it like
That's
getting it from a
yes.
already verified database?
And what's so interesting about Wikipedia too is that over the course of time, it gets erased and changed in some ways.
Right.
It's which I really want to start to talk about just in my own on the podcast, but um is how over the course of history, so much gets shifted and changed in what we remember, how we remember it, how it was told to us, and all sorts of things. But we see it on Wikipedia for sure. It's like, it's almost like it evolves and changes, and some stories get taken down and all sorts of things. So who really has the control is the question, right? Who really is behind all of it?
Probably just some like Donald Duck somewhere, just like uh
Mickey
just a
Mouse?
Mickey Mouse is controlling it all. It's what it
Yeah,
definitely feels like
it
cartoon
does.
land.
I know it does. It absolutely does. Um,
But I guess I do want to say though, for like again going back to how people can prepare,
yes, please.
because I do want to also just mention um the importance and power of conservation of your finances first and foremost, but to say that if no one has told anyone this, we're not really being told what to do by the government. So I think as astrologers, it's kind of our place when we see astrological things happen, it's our kind of responsibility to say, hey, you know, shit's gonna get worse. So maybe we should prepare some things for ourselves because no one else is doing that for us.
Mhm.
So again, going back to like how inflation, it's going to get worse. Um, the dollar is going to lose its value. So people should do what they can in order to help preserve that, which might be to maybe purchase food items or just like maybe if you can buy a little extra for
Right,
yourself now to help save up for later when it gets more expensive. So,
right.
like, what I've been doing when I see meat on sale, for instance, I'm like, oh, just like get a couple extra to put in the freezer so I have later when, the inevitable happens when the price of that goes up.
Right. So when is the time? Do we have a timeline for when that really starts to occur?
It's happening now. So, and then it moves into 2024. I would say that maybe by 2025 it gets a bit more stable. So, um, using this time as an opportunity to either, since the dollar is inflated, to sell off
Mm,
things and then conserve that dollar into other things that are less, that like the value is less of. So, what
oh,
happens with inflation is like you sell something at a higher inflated price when it's inflated, and then you kind of hold on to that or preserve it somehow, maybe in Bitcoin or maybe in gold or maybe in silver or something,
mhm.
or even just cash, I guess, until the inflation rate goes down. And then you have this surplus because you sold when the prices were high. And then later on, when the prices went down, now you have more
Yeah,
cash power.
cash power. The everything that's kind of come through on the financial markets that I've been following, and different stories, would be heavy metals. So precious metals, sorry. So silver, gold, things like that are, I mean, because they've only increased over the course of the past 3 years. The silver is now, I mean, it's just creeping higher, where everything
Mm.
else has dropped. So they're still saying those types of ways of, if you really wanted to buy silver or gold. Cash is interesting, because cash is one of those things, if you have it around, you have to have it in a safe place. And, there's this element of, with this Uranian energy of like, what if, there's a fire, or what if there's something where you can't access it? So that one's tricky. And then a lot of places are no longer accepting cash, right? So there's that as well, which I feel like goes against the Constitution, but that's my own opinion. Because I love cash. So I think all of those are great suggestions, truly. And yeah, getting in this idea of how we're preserving, but still living life to the fullest, without just feeling that fear of something's coming and something's going to happen and everything's going to kind of go to shit.
Hmm.
Because there can be those moments of like, oh no, if
Right.
if this all crashes down, what do we do?
Right. Like you could be creating an inner apocalypse in the meantime. Um, but I think I've just adopted the belief that it's inevitable, and
Mm.
that helps me. like, like it's gonna happen anyway, so I might as well just acceptance is where I'm at. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so now I've accepted it. What can I do? What is the productive thing that I can do to help navigate the downturns? And evolve myself or change my situation or have some flexibility
Yeah.
in order to be able to make moves for my life or my situation that allows me to maybe alter or change quickly
Mm.
um, when
Makes
it
you
needs to
adapt.
happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's what 2020 taught me for sure, is the ability to have a certain amount of freedom to shift and change and move and adapt, because things are so tricky and always changing. So if I have the ability to like bend and be flexible, then I think that's probably the best bet.
Yeah. I completely agree. We're, going into this, even these degrees of Uranus, and we haven't seen it since the 1930s, right? So starting to think about really what was the 1930s about. It was soup lines. It was the Depression.
Mhm.
It was, people keep saying we're in a recession. Well, it's starting to feel more like we're going into a depression
Mm.
with some of this, really with some of the writing on the wall. But how, even thinking about back during that time, and none of us, not, neither of us have lived through that by any means, but there were still people who were successful, who still came out of it,
True.
and they survived and they thrived. So knowing that, and just trusting that, and just knowing you're going to be
Hmm.
okay. We're going to pull through for sure. Um, because there has to be that hope outside of this idea of like, I know for a lot of people, money especially, it's like money or love, but money for sure is the biggest anxiety, you know, creator, that the fear of not having it. Oh my goodness. That's so I empathize, and I want to say, like, don't let's not totally go to that place, but they're just prepare for, you know, how are we moving forward in a way that we can save those extra dollars, and really have and be able to create a beautiful future. Um,
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
as this wonderful astrology progresses.
The revelations.
Revelations, I know. And that was the other thing too, is like, hearing about just all the religious fanaticism as well. I mean, goes
Right.
both ways, but there's this kind of this newfound, this is the end times, and this is the book of Revelations, and look at this, and this. And it's like, we have to remember, and we have to like ground out that it can look a certain way. And then with that, honestly, with that Uranus energy, all it does, something happens and it flips and it becomes something amazing, or, something completely different than we ever thought. So yeah, that's my thought on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And what do they, hardship builds character. So if anything, and what comes out of it is innovation and character, and a renewed sense of self-empowerment as well when you go through tough times and hardship, and unification of community too, like you were mentioning
Absolutely.
with the very Uranian, is the reconnection of us and our resources. And I think even physically, like we talked about last month, the reconnection of our sense of self with our land and our people and who we want to be in close proximity with. And I personally have been seeing the benefits of being in a tight knit, close community and seeing like, oh wow, that's like a really great resource. That's
Yeah,
a really beautiful like abundant place to be if you
absolutely.
have that connection with
Absolutely. And
people.
yes, and if you think about too, when because the way we're talking about the astrology too is, it's like, it's happening to all of us, but we're all having to preserve in all these different ways. But when you have community, or when you have neighbors that you can trust, or really solid relationships, right? You can count on somebody else who might have that thing that you need when you need it. So
Hmm.
just, yeah, maintaining those relationships through this time is so important. Really.
Definitely, 100%. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Things are changing. Things are always changing. We're definitely in a ramped up period where we're lucky enough to get to sit and watch kind of the downfall of an empire. And I know that a lot of us have gone through past lives and karma with
Mm.
abuse from empires and government. So personally, I feel like I came back specifically to watch this empire fall, and be a part of it in a somewhat revenge way, but also to be part of the rebuild and to help restructure what the future can look like,
Yeah.
um, which is, yeah, more equitable. I think one thing we'll just have to be very mindful of is where our belief systems or our old belief systems are holding or hindering us from being able to adapt into the new way of seeing reality and this political structure, and which is maybe the old polarity or duality mindset of like red versus blue,
Yes.
because that's what really has
Yes.
been holding us back such an extreme. Or for instance, this belief, I hate to say it, but this belief in this democratic system, yes, but also seeing how obviously it's allowed for a lot of corruption to happen.
It
Um,
has. Where we think,
yeah.
yeah, I think as Americans, we've always thought that happens in other countries, right? It's like, oh, yes, they're very corrupt in Russia, or they're very corrupt in, I remember I had friends from Ukraine when I was younger, and they would talk about the mobs that were running that government in Ukraine.
Mm,
And And you go, well, this is America. That's not happening. But it's starting to reveal itself as that is what's happening. And that's what's been happening. And when you have politicians come out and say they're running for reelection, or they're running for, I think Biden just came out and said he was running for reelection, and just his reelection was to fight the extremism of the right instead of anything else. It was just like, we have to fight this extremist rights. And no matter what side you're on,
What?
if somebody comes out and says, like, we have to fight this extremist other side, just like if Trump said that, right? It would just, it rubs up people the wrong way. It's like, what are you talking about? That's not united in any way. And even though you might disagree with somebody's viewpoints on one side or the other, it doesn't mean that you're the holiest, and you hold that holy grail of being right. It's like everybody has different ideas and different perspectives and different opinions. They've grown up all different places. It's not like everybody grew up in one area and they have the same experiences. So I really hope to see something different come out of the political system over the next couple of years. So fingers crossed.
Me too. Me too. That was a very Libran and democratic way. And Biden is a Scorpio, right?
Biden's a 12th house Scorpio. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Kamala is a Libra, which I'm like, okay, if we need anything more than ever right now, it's a freaking Libra. Not that Kamala is the one that I want or anything, but in general, we need someone who has some etiquette and like a like
Yes.
bureaucratic way of speaking to be able to communicate eloquently and of sound mind
Yeah.
to a nation divided. And that's 100% not the way to do it, is to wage war on your opposing side and the voters. So Scorpio, it's like, we must destroy them.
Scorpio.
Or else.
I mean, he's got an interesting chart. Though I will say my youngest son, Beckett, is a 12th house Scorpio. And so he has some of the aspects, and I'm always like, oh no, is this a
Biden?
little Biden? No. Should I be
But
concerned?
maybe you have a better awareness and like an insight into Biden because of your son. And
yes, but Biden, okay, so in his chart, he also has Jupiter retrograde that doesn't actually go progressed. He won't live to see the progression of it. So I think with him, he's never going to truly have gotten what he really wanted. So there's this really interesting elements with him, and not only is a lot hidden, a lot has happened to him, even in the beginning with the death of his first wife, and there was a lot that happened. And so there's stuff that I think coming out even about the family now, that when people say, oh, there's nothing to that, no, you look in his chart, it's 100% accurate what has been revealed or what's been uncovered, whether it's his son's laptop or his connections to China, his connections in the Ukraine, or his son's connections. So his family is invested in a lot of different things that by looking at his chart would be accurate. So everybody has their ghosts in their closet, I guess, but some are more, some are bigger than others. And so I hope over the course, and I do believe he probably, watching some of his speeches, it would seem as he's, not only not fully there, but his mental capacity is so deteriorated that some of the words that come out of his mouth, you can't even understand what he's saying. So it's almost an injustice to keep him up there as this political figurehead when he can't properly function.
Right. Yeah. And hopefully we have, maybe that's a discussion that comes up for the future of the country is like, what's the appropriate time to
Mm,
like cut off
yes.
someone at a certain age? I know that everyone's different and everyone has like, there's some people who have like very clear cognitive abilities up until the moment that they pass. Everyone's different, but with the amount of lead in the water and the amount of fluoride, I don't know if that's going to be the case for the rest of us in our generation. Like, I
Yes.
think that the
So
mental
true.
decline is unfortunately inevitable for us unless you've been living in the wilderness or something outside of all the toxins and plastic. But
Right. I don't
I
know.
think,
It's funny. It's like, even if you live in the wilderness, I'm curious, you probably have better like teeth and things like that. But do you still get this air? It's like, or do the trees from the wilderness, I don't know. Maybe I have a feeling that I would be miserable living in the wilderness. So I try to make it like it would still not be enjoyable. But yeah, I think over the course of this next, even the course of the next few months, we're going to start to see a total reshaping of some political um landscapes. So
mhm.
we'll stay tuned, and we can dive more into it next time. And
Yes.
Evelyn, thank you so much for sharing this overview and this talk, and just all the things that you bring that really do um, help us all to see clearer and to start to live a life that's a little bit more aware and awake. So thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Well, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
looking forward to next month.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait. Thank you.